The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, each fighting for control over their piece of the stars. But no one had ever dared challenge humanity. The humans of Earth had always been small in number, living on a planet tucked away in the corner of the galaxy. Yet there was something about them that made other species wary. They were resilient, resourceful, and above all, they never gave up. The Galactic Empire had been expanding for centuries, swallowing up planets one after another. They had conquered entire star systems. Their military forces feared across the galaxy. It seemed like nothing could stand in their way. But Earth, with its small but determined population, was proving to be a problem. The Empire had made demands before, asking for Earth's resources, wanting to bring the humans under their control. But every time, the humans refused. This had frustrated the Empire's leaders. They had decided that it was time to make an example of Earth. The Empire's flagship, a massive warship that could destroy planets, was already on its way. Leader of the Galactic Empire, Emperor Talak, stood at the head of a council, his cold eyes scanning the room filled with his top generals. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the cold metal table. He had grown tired of Earth's defiance. His voice echoed through the room as he spoke. "We will end this human nuisance once and for all. No more delays, no more negotiations. This time, we will strike with everything we have." The generals nodded, their faces hard with determination. They knew the power of the Empire's weapons. It was not a matter of if Earth would fall, but when they all agreed that this would be the last time anyone would dare challenge the Empire on Earth. The humans had received the Empire's demands, loud and clear. The message was sent to every major city, warning the people that their planet would be destroyed unless they surrendered. There was no room for negotiation, no chance for peace. Earth had to bow to the Empire, or face total annihilation. But the humans did not panic. Instead, they gathered their leaders. In the heart of a secure underground bunker, General Robert Mason stood before a large screen, showing the Empire's warships closing in on Earth. His face was grim, his eyes hard with resolve. The room around him was filled with military officers, engineers and strategists, all working quietly, focusing on their tasks. Mason had led countless battles before, but this was different. The stakes had never been higher. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had gathered to protect Earth. They were all waiting for him to speak, to give them a plan. He took a deep breath and walked to the center of the room, his boots clicking on the metal floor. "We've been preparing for this day for years," he began, his voice calm but firm. "The Empire thinks we are weak. They think we will bow to their demands, just like every other species they have conquered. But they don't understand what we are capable of." The officers exchanged looks, their expressions a mix of doubt and hope. "They've underestimated us before," Mason continued. "And that's where they made their mistake. This time we will show them what it means to challenge humanity." Mason paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "To a large map of Earth and the surrounding space, we've been developing something powerful, something they won't see coming. It's our trump card, and when we unleash it, they won't have time to react." The officers stood taller now, their nerves replaced by excitement. They had heard rumors of this secret weapon, but no one knew the full details. They trusted Mason, and they trusted the plan. "This weapon," Mason said, pointing to the map, "will do more than just defend Earth. It will send a message. A message that the Empire cannot ignore. It will make them regret ever underestimating us." The silence in the room was thick. Then one of the officers, Lieutenant Sarah Williams, spoke up. "But General, what if it's not enough?
What if
they have something we don't know about? What if they come with more power than we can handle?" Mason turned to face her, his gaze steady. "We don't have a choice, Lieutenant. We don't act now, Earth will fall. We must stand and fight. The Empire will not have another chance to attack us." The room fell quiet again, and Mason felt the weight of the moment. The fate of Earth was in their hands. He knew the risk. He knew the odds were against them. But he also knew that humanity had something that the Empire did not understand: the will to fight, the strength to survive, and the ability to surprise. Mason turned back to the map. Prepare the weapon. We'll need every ship and every soldier ready. We won't just defend Earth. We'll make the Empire wish they never came. Officers nodded, and the room erupted into action. The plan was in motion. As the minutes ticked by, the general sat at his desk, looking at a photo of his family. The weight of the war was heavy on his heart, but he had made his choice. The Empire would not have Earth, not without a fight. Meanwhile, aboard the Empire's warship, Emperor Talek stood before his own generals, waiting for the final word. He could feel the victory already within his grasp. Earth's fate was sealed. But what Talek didn't know was that humanity had already prepared. A surprise one that would change everything. The countdown had begun. On Earth, the calm before the storm had finally ended. The Galactic Empire's warships were already in orbit around the planet, ready to unleash their terrifying might. Their messages to humanity were clear: surrender or face complete destruction. But despite the overwhelming odds, the humans refused to back down. They had one last card to play, a weapon so powerful that it would change the course of the war. General Robert Mason. Standing in the heart of a hidden underground base was the man who held the key to humanity's survival. His team of scientists and engineers had spent years developing something that, until now, was only a theory. But now it was ready. Mason looked down at a glowing control panel, his fingers brushing over the holographic display. The weapon was activated, and its power pulsed through the base. "Are we ready?" Mason asked, his voice steady but with an edge of tension. He knew that this was their only chance. If they failed, Earth would be lost. Dr. Evelyn Cole, the chief scientist behind the weapons development, stood beside him. Her face was a mask of concentration as she examined the data flashing on the screen. "The weapon is fully charged, General. It's ready to deploy," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We've never tested it on this scale before, but if the calculations are correct, it will destroy anything in its path." Mason nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Then we use it. We can't waste any time." They had been working in secret for years, constructing a device that harnessed the power of a black hole. It was a weapon capable of manipulating space and time itself. It could destroy entire fleets with the blink of an eye, but it came with risks. The energy required to power it was immense, and its effects were unpredictable. The Empire would have no idea what was coming for them. Back in space, Empire's fleet hovered ominously above Earth. The massive warships, their engines glowing with readiness, waited for the order to strike. Emperor Talek, standing on the command deck of the flagship Revenant, surveyed the planet below. He was confident, too confident perhaps. The humans were insignificant in the grand scheme of things. He had crushed empires far larger than Earth's. This would be no different. "Prepare the cannons," Talek ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We will give them no more time to resist. Once Earth is in our grasp, their colonies will fall." Like dominoes, his generals moved swiftly, each aware of their role in the attack. The vast fleet of warships was ready, each one bristling with weapons powerful enough to reduce entire cities to ashes. The moment was approaching, back on Earth. The countdown had begun. General Mason watched as the control room filled with officers, all ready to execute the plan. He had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. The Empire's ships were powerful, and their firepower would be overwhelming. But Mason had something they didn't: humanity's unbreakable will to survive. Dr. Cole stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The weapon was primed and ready, and with a final keystroke she sent the order. A deep hum filled the room as the energy of the weapon began to surge through the underground base, flowing into the device hidden beneath the Earth's surface. The power of a black hole was now at humanity's command. Mason stood tall, his hand resting on the control panel. "Activate the weapon," he said, his voice unwavering. His eyes were focused, unblinking, as the tension in the room rose. Outside the base, the ground began to shake, the air humming with the unimaginable force of the weapon's power. The black hole was not visible, but its effects were felt across the entire planet. The atmosphere crackled with energy as the weapon tore open the fabric of space itself. The first test was the city of Atlanta, located just outside the main military headquarters. In an instant, a beam of pure energy shot from the weapon, tearing through the atmosphere. The Empire's warships were unaware of what had just occurred. They only saw the sudden flash of light from below, and by the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. A powerful shockwave rippled through the fleet. The Empire's warships were thrown off course. Several large vessels were caught in the blast, their shields failing under the force of the black hole's energy. Ships began to disintegrate, their once imposing forms reduced to nothing. More than debris scattered across space. On the Revenant, Emperor Talik's face twisted with disbelief as the destruction unfolded before him. His fleet, his pride, was being torn apart by something he couldn't even comprehend. The sudden loss of control sent his generals into a panic. "Report," he demanded, his voice sharp and filled with fury. The chief officer on the bridge stammered. "Sire, our shields are failing. The energy readings are off the charts." Before he could finish, the ship lurched violently. The massive flagship was struck by another pulse from the weapon, this time aimed directly at its core. The Revenant began to break apart, its hull groaning as the forces pulling at it grew stronger. Talik's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening. The weapon was not just a threat, it was a nightmare. And the Empire was at its mercy. "Get us out of here," Talik shouted. But the damage was too severe. The Empire's fleet, caught in the devastating force of humanity's new weapon, was crumbling before his eyes. There was no escape. The moment the human leader had promised was now here. Back on Earth, the generals and officers watched as their screens filled with reports of victory. The Empire's warships were retreating, their once mighty fleet in ruins. The weapon had worked beyond their expectations, but General Mason was not celebrating. He knew the war wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning. The Empire would regroup. They would not take this defeat lightly. Mason turned to Dr. Cole, who stood silently beside him, her face pale from the strain of the weapon's activation. "We've won this battle, but the war is far from over." Dr. Cole nodded, her voice a whisper. "The Empire won't stop, but neither will we." And as the remnants of the Empire's fleet retreated, Mason knew one thing for certain. Humanity had just shown the galaxy that it would never be pushed around again. The shockwaves from the human weapon had barely settled before the Empire's leaders were scrambling to regain control. The loss of entire fleets, including the Revenant, was a devastating blow, one that no one had expected. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was on the defensive. The once feared Empire, with all its advanced technology and military might, was reeling from a single strike. Emperor Talik stood at the center of his war room, staring at the massive holographic map of the galaxy. The once proud symbols of his fleets were now reduced to blinking dots, scattered and broken. His empire, so close to victory, was crumbling. He slammed his fist onto the table in frustration. "How could this happen?" he muttered under his breath. "We are the Empire, should not be defeated by by them." One of his generals, trembling, slightly stepped forward. "Sire, the humans, this weapon they've used, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. Don't know how it works. We've never faced anything like it." Talak's eyes narrowed. "Then find out. Send every remaining fleet we have. We'll not stop until we crush them." Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Robert Mason stood in the heart of the underground command center. The monitors around him displayed images of Earth's atmosphere, and reports poured in from every corner of the planet. The weapon had done its job. The Empire's first wave had been broken, but Mason knew it wasn't over. The Empire would strike back, and this time, they would come prepared. General Dr. Evelyn Cole's voice broke through his thoughts. She had been working tirelessly to analyze the aftermath of the weapon's first use. The weapon worked perfectly. "But there's a risk. If we keep using it, we'll deplete all our energy reserves. We need to conserve its power for when it truly counts." Mason nodded gravely. "I know. But we can't wait for them to regroup. We need to strike now, while they're weak." The decision was made. Earth would take the fight to the Empire, and They would do it with the strength of their most advanced ships and their secret weapon. As the fleet of human warships moved toward the edge of their atmosphere, the stars ahead shimmered in the cold void of space. Each ship was armed to the teeth with advanced weaponry, but none were as powerful as the weapon hidden beneath Earth's surface. The general had made it clear that it would be the final card they played, and only when necessary. Lieutenant Sarah Williams, one of Mason's most trusted officers, walked beside him as they prepared for the launch. "Are we really going to attack now?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "They've suffered a huge defeat. Isn't it better to wait for them to make the first move?" Mason paused and looked out at the fleet assembling in space. "Wait, Sarah. They'll rebuild. They'll come back stronger. We have to show them we're not afraid. If we can take them by surprise again, it might be enough to force them to the negotiation table." Sarah took a deep breath. "I understand, sir, but it's a gamble." "It always has been," Mason said, his tone resolute. "We've been underdogs since the beginning, but we've never backed down." The human fleet, now fully armed and ready, jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the Empire's remaining fleet. The distance between the two forces seemed vast, but the humans moved with purpose. They knew the Empire would expect a retreat, not an assault, and that was their advantage. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Talek's remaining fleet was recovering. The Emperor was furious, but knew he had to act quickly. He had sent out all remaining forces to track down the humans and eliminate them once and for all. He couldn't afford another surprise attack. His fleet was massive, more than enough to wipe out Earth and its colonies, but he had underestimated the humans, and now he would pay the price. The battle began quickly. As the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, the Empire's remaining ships immediately opened fire. Laser beams and missiles filled the space between the two forces, each shot lighting up the darkness of space. The human ships returned fire with precision, their newly upgraded weapons tearing through the Empire's defenses. "All units engage at full power," General Mason ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos of the battle. His fleet was outnumbered, but they were fighting with everything they had. Each human ship was equipped with advanced tech smarter, shields, faster engines, and weapons that packed a punch. But the Empire's ships were enormous and heavily armored. They had more firepower, and for a brief moment, the human fleet began to feel the pressure. The Empire's fleet came in waves, each stronger than the last. They had more ships, more weapons, and more resources. Yet, the humans fought back with skill and courage, launching precise strikes at weak points in the Empire's fleet. The tide was turning, slowly but surely. "Brace for impact." One of the human officers called out as an enemy ship fired on their position. The human vessel rocked, but it held steady. The crew worked together, focusing on their mission. Every single member of the crew, from the highest officer to the newest recruit, knew their role. There was no room for hesitation. As the battle raged, a message came through the fleet's comm system. It was from the enemy. Tolak's voice rang out, dripping with venom. "You dare attack us, humans. You have no idea what you're up against. I will destroy every last one of you. You will never know peace again." Mason's eyes narrowed as he listened to the broadcast. He's angry. Good, that means we're winning. The Empire's forces continued to push forward, but they were starting to lose control. The human fleet, though smaller, was more organized and determined. Their strategy was paying off. The Empire's large, slow ships were easy targets for the faster, more agile human vessels. Mason glanced at the control panel. "Get ready for the final strike," he said. "Prepare the weapon." The weapon, still hidden beneath the Earth's surface, was humanity's last hope. It would be their most powerful strike yet, and it was the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy. "Do it," Mason said. The weapon hummed to life, and in the blink of an eye, a beam of energy shot from the Earth, slamming into the heart of the Empire's remaining fleet. Ships began to explode in flashes of light as the powerful wave of energy hit its target. The battle was over. Empire had been defeated. For now, humanity had won. The human victory was short-lived. The The remnants of the Empire's fleet, though scattered and broken, still held power. Emperor Talak, humiliated and furious, retreated to a hidden stronghold deep within the galaxy. He was determined to rebuild his empire no matter the cost. The defeat at Earth had been a crushing blow, but it had not been the end. Talak stood in the quiet of his private chamber, the dark shadows of the room flickering from the holographic lights. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Humans had somehow found a way to strike at the very heart of the Empire, and now he had to find a way to hit them back. Their weapon was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was clear that if the Empire was to survive, drastic measures would have to be taken. "Prepare the fleet," Talak ordered, his voice cold and calculating. "We will not be caught off guard again. We'll show the humans that they can never defeat the might of the Empire." His generals, loyal but worried, bowed their heads. They knew the situation was dire. They had been forced to abandon a large part of their fleet, and their pride had been shattered. But they also knew that Talak was not one to give up easily. His ambition to dominate the galaxy was as strong as ever. "We will rebuild," the general in charge of the fleet said, trying to reassure Talak. "This defeat is a temporary setback. With our new fleet, we will reclaim what we've lost." Talak's eyes narrowed. "This time, we will strike harder. The humans will regret ever standing against us." On Earth, General Robert Mason and his officers were still recovering from the battle. The weapon had dealt a devastating blow to the Empire, but Mason knew that this victory was only temporary. The Empire was far from defeated. They had regrouped, and they were coming back stronger than ever. The Earth's fleet had been victorious in space, but on the surface, the cost of the battle was clear. Cities had been damaged, and many lives had been lost. There was no time to rest, no time for celebration. The humans needed to prepare for what was coming next. Mason paced back and forth in the command center, his hands clenched behind his back. The war was far from over. Empire would return, and this time they would be ready. "We've got to keep the pressure on," Mason said to his officers. "We can't afford to be complacent. The Empire is rebuilding, and when they come back, they will be more powerful than before. We have to stop them before they can recover fully." The officers nodded, their faces grim but determined. Had already lost too much, and they weren't about to let the Empire take control of Earth again. But there was a sense of urgency in the air now. The Empire was coming. No one knew how long they had before the next wave of attacks. Back on the Empire's fleet, Talak's forces were growing. New ships, reinforced with advanced technology, began to emerge from secret military bases. The Empire had poured all its resources into rebuilding its forces. And the new ships were designed with one purpose in mind: revenge. As the new fleet took shape, Talak stared at a hologram of Earth, now a dark and damaged planet. The humans had won the first battle, but they would not win the war. His fleet was larger, better armed, and ready to strike. "We'll launch a full-scale assault," Talak announced to his commanders. "The humans will never see us coming. Once we invade their homeworld, they will have no choice but to surrender." His generals nodded in agreement. The new fleet was faster, more powerful, and more deadly than before. This time, there would be no mistakes. The Empire's military might would crush the humans once and for all. On Earth, Mason and his officers were still working day and night to prepare for the Empire's next move. They knew that the Empire would strike again, and they had to be ready. The weapon that had saved them once could not be relied upon again. It was too dangerous, too unpredictable. They needed a new strategy, a way to counter the Empire's overwhelming forces. Dr. Evelyn Cole, still by Mason's side, had been working tirelessly to develop new technologies. "We've made some progress," she said, looking at the data on her screen. "We've developed new shields that could withstand the Empire's blasts. They won't be able to break through as easily." Mason's eyes lit up with hope. "That's exactly what we need. If we can hold them off long enough, we can buy ourselves some time." But even as they spoke, the Empire was already moving. Talak's fleet, now fully repaired and upgraded, was heading toward Earth faster than anyone had anticipated. The humans were preparing for the worst. but they had no idea how powerful the Empire had become. The final battle was about to begin. The human fleet was stationed just beyond Earth's atmosphere, waiting for the Empire's next move. The officers were on edge, watching the skies for any signs of the incoming invasion. The tension was thick, and every soldier and officer felt the weight of what was to come. They knew that if they lost this battle, it would mean the end for humanity. "We're ready," General Lieutenant Sarah Williams said, her voice steady, despite the anxiety she felt. "We've got everything we can, but the Empire's new fleet is huge. We'll need to work together if we're going to make it through this." Mason nodded. "We've got one shot at this. If we don't stop them here, we don't get a second chance." The human fleet's engines hummed as they moved into position, ready to face the Empire head-on. The moment of truth was upon them. The Empire's ships appeared on the horizon, their massive forms filling the space around Earth. The time for talking was over. The battle for Earth had begun again. The battle had begun, and the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the two forces clashed above Earth. The Empire's new fleet, larger and more advanced than ever before, filled the skies with dark shadows. The human fleet, though smaller, was determined. They had no choice now but to fight. This would be their last stand. General Robert Mason stood in the command center, his eyes glued to the massive holographic display in front of him. The Empire's ships were massive, far bigger than any human vessel. But Mason knew that size didn't always matter. It was the human will to survive, to fight back, that would make the difference. "We've got one shot at this," Mason said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of responsibility. "We need to break through their lines and strike the heart of their fleet. Once we do that, they won't have the strength to continue." The officers around him nodded. The plan was risky, but it was the only option they had. The Empire's fleet had too much firepower to be taken down in a prolonged battle. They had to hit fast, hit hard, and destroy the heart of the Empire's war machine. "Ready all ships for the assault," Mason ordered. "We go in together. No one gets left." Behind, the human fleet began to move, its ships slipping into formation. Each ship was equipped with advanced weapons and armor, but the real strength came from their teamwork. The humans knew how to work together, how to fight for each other. That was their greatest advantage. In space, the Empire's fleet loomed, like a storm on the horizon. Tolak's ships were ready, their weapons powered up, their engines primed for destruction. The Emperor stood at the front of his flagship, watching the battle unfold. His face was cold, his eyes filled with anger. The defeated Earth had hurt his pride, but he wasn't about to let it break him. This time, the Empire would be victorious. "Prepare to engage," Tolak's voice boomed through the command deck. "We will destroy them this time. Their resistance ends here." The two fleets moved toward each other, the distance between them closing rapidly. The first shots were fired, the laser beams slicing through space, lighting up the darkness with bursts of energy. The human ships, despite their smaller size, held their ground, firing back with precision. Mason watched the battle unfold on his screen, his fingers gripping the armrest of his chair. "Stay focused," he muttered under his breath. "Can't let up." The humans were holding their own, but it was clear that the Empire had the advantage in firepower. Their ships were huge, their weapons powerful. But the humans had something. The Empire didn't speed agility and the will to fight to the end. "Target their shield generators," Mason ordered. "We need to cripple their defenses." The human fleet changed tactics, focusing their fire on the weak points of the Empire's ships. The smaller human vessels darted around the larger ships, avoiding incoming fire as they hit the Empire's shields with precision shots. Slowly but surely, the shield generators began to weaken. "We're getting through," Lieutenant Sarah Williams shouted from the weapons control panel. Their shields are failing." The Empire's flagship, the Revenant, remained a towering presence in the center of the fleet, its massive cannons firing relentlessly at the humans. Talok stood on the bridge, watching the battle unfold, his face twisted in frustration. Fleet was being chipped away, one ship at a time. He had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. This ends now. Talak said, his voice low and dangerous. Send in the heavy artillery. We'll crush them once and for all. The Empire launched their final offensive. Massive cannons on the Revenant fired, sending powerful shockwaves through space. The blasts tore through the human lines, knocking several ships off course. The human shields held for a moment, but the force of the impact sent shockwaves. Through their vessels, Mason gritted his teeth as his ship rocked. We can't let them push us back. Hold your ground. The human fleet rallied, pushing back against the Empire's forces. The smaller ships moved in closer, firing their weapons with deadly accuracy. But the Empire's flagship was still, standing strong, and the humans knew they had to take it down if they were going to win. Lieutenant, get us in close to the Revenant, Mason commanded. We need to strike its core. On it, General Sarah Williams responded, her hands flying across the controls. The human ships began to move toward the Revenant, incoming fire as they closed in on their target. The Empire's cannons fired again, but the human ships were quick, weaving through the blasts and staying just out of range. The final assault was about to begin. Now, Mason shouted. At that moment, the human fleet unleashed everything they had. The weapon beneath the earth, still fully charged, hummed to life, sending a beam of concentrated energy directly toward the Revenant. The blast hit the flagship with a force that rattled the very fabric of space. The Revenant trembled as the beam cut through its hull, the ship's shields collapsing under the immense pressure. Sparks flew from the control panels as the Empire's flagship began to crumble, its massive engines sputtering and dying. For a moment, it seemed like the ship would hold, but then with a deafening roar, the Revenant exploded, its remains scattering across the void of space. The human fleet had won. The Empire's heart had been destroyed. Mason stood in silence, watching as the remains of the flagship drifted away. His chest tightened as the weight of the battle settled on him. He had led his people to victory, but at a great cost. Ships had been lost, and many brave soldiers had fallen. The war was far from over, but today, humans had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. We did it, Sarah Williams said, her voice filled with relief. Mason turned. To her, his face hard with resolve. We've won the battle, but the war isn't over. We still have to rebuild. He looked at the view screen again, knowing that the Empire would never stop trying to conquer the galaxy. But now, humanity had a chance to fight back, to protect their world, and to prove to everyone that they would never be slaves to anyone again. The final showdown had ended. But the story of humanity's fight was only just beginning. The battle was over. The Empire's once mighty fleet had been destroyed, and their flagship, the Revenant, was nothing more than floating debris in the vastness of space. The Empire, for now, was broken. But the cost of the battle was clear to the humans. Though the victory had been hard won, the war was far from finished. On Earth, General Robert Mason stood in the command center, his hands folded behind his back. His face was tired, his mind heavy with the weight of the decisions he had made. The last few weeks had been nothing but endless planning, battle after battle, and now there was silence. The immediate threat was gone, but the humans knew better than to think it was over. Talak was still alive. Empire was still out there, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Mason turned to his officers. We've won today, but this is not the end. The Empire will rebuild. We need to use this time wisely, strengthen our defenses, rebuild our fleet, and most importantly, prepare for what comes next. Lieutenant Sarah Williams, standing beside him, nodded. We can't afford to relax. The Empire's already looking for ways to regain control. We'll have to keep pushing forward. The officers around them were all alert, their faces serious. They understood what was at stake. Earth had survived, but many of their cities had been damaged. The battle in space had left scars on their planet. The human spirit had triumphed. But at a heavy cost, we need to send a message to the galaxy, Mason said, his voice firm. Let them know that humanity won't back down. We'll never be slaves to anyone. If anyone dares challenge us again, will be ready. Across the galaxy, the news of the humans' victory had spread like wildfire. Factions that had once laughed at Earth's attempts to defend itself now looked at the small planet with a new respect. The mighty empire had been defeated by a people they had once considered insignificant. But while many celebrated humanity's triumph, others grew nervous. The fall of the empire had created a power vacuum. Other factions, eager to take advantage of the empire's weakened state, began to make their own moves. Some saw an opportunity to take Earth's resources, while others feared that humanity's rise could threaten their own power. Mason and his officers knew that the galaxy was far from peaceful. They had earned their victory, but the future remained uncertain. Every move they made now would shape the path ahead, in the heart of a hidden base deep within the galaxy. Emperor Talek stood before a screen displaying the shattered remains of his fleet. The loss of the Revenant was a blow to his pride, but Talek was not one to be easily defeated. He had faced failure before, and he had always bounced back stronger. His mind was already working on how to take revenge on the humans who had humiliated him. "Send word to all our loyalists," Talek ordered, his voice cold. "We will rebuild. I will not stop until Earth is under my control. The humans think they've won, but they are mistaken. We will show them the true power of the Empire." His generals and officers, though defeated, nodded in agreement. Ambition was as fierce as ever. He would never allow a small planet like Earth to stand in his way. The galaxy would bend to his will. Back on Earth, the human government began to rebuild. Cities that had been damaged during the war slowly came back to life. The people worked together, their determination stronger than ever. Earth had proven itself on the galactic stage, and now it was time to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. General Mason had never been one to rest on his laurels. He knew that this victory was just the beginning. The humans had proven their strength, but they had also made enemies. They needed to be prepared for whatever came next. "I don't want anyone to get comfortable," Mason said in a meeting with his senior officers. "We have a long road ahead of us. Empire might be down, but they're not out. We need to prepare for the next fight. This galaxy is full of threats, and we must be ready for anything." Sarah Williams spoke up. "We've proven we can fight. But now, we need to make sure we don't lose everything we've worked for. We need allies. We need to make sure the other factions understand that we're not just survivors. We're a force to be reckoned with." Mason nodded. "Right. We can't do this alone. But we can show the galaxy that we're strong enough to protect ourselves, and that anyone who wants to harm us will face the consequences." The officers around him agreed. There was no time to waste. The future of humanity depended on what they did next. They had shown the galaxy their power, but now they had to prove that they could maintain it. Weeks passed, and the human government worked tirelessly to rebuild. Earth's fleets were being upgraded, new ships designed with the latest technology. Their military strength had never been greater. But as the humans worked to fortify their defenses, they also began to look outward. They knew that to survive in a galaxy full of dangers, they needed to forge alliances with other species. The galaxy could be a dangerous place, but it also held the potential for new friends, new allies. Mason was in constant communication with other factions, offering aid to those who had been affected by the Empire's reign. The humans were no longer just a small, isolated species. They were part of something bigger. They were becoming a powerful force in the galaxy, one that could shape the future, and yet even as humanity reached out to others, Mason knew that they could never let their guard down. The Empire had been defeated, but new threats would always emerge. The galaxy would always be full of dangers, and the humans would need to be ready for them. As Mason looked out over Earth's surface, now recovering from the scars of war, he knew that the fight wasn't over. But one thing was certain. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. They had risen against the Empire, and they had won. And as long as there was breath in their lungs, they would continue to fight. The battle had ended, but the story of humanity's rise had only just begun.